Semester number 2, lesson number 23. Our aim today is how did the attack on Pearl Harbor signify a complete change in American foreign policy? And we'll talk more about what Pearl Harbor is today and tomorrow. This is a 2-day lesson. Remember, when we're talking about American foreign policy, we're talking about their dealings with outside countries, right? Domestic policy is within the United States. Foreign policy is their policy or their dealings with other countries. And we're going to see this attack on Pearl Harbor, which is in Hawaii, by the Japanese, is going to signify a complete change in American foreign policy. If you recall from past lessons, during the interwar period between World War I and World War II, the United States was very isolated, very neutral. And this is going to force them to have to basically come out of neutrality. So the first thing we're going to talk about are the causes of the attack on Pearl Harbor. All right. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Pearl Harbor is attacked by the Japanese. And the reason the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor is the U.S. demanded that Japan withdraw from China and Indochina. If you guys recall from last year in Global, Japan was trying to industrialize at this time. And if you think about Japan, it's an archipelago, a bunch of island chains. They don't have the natural resources necessary to industrialize. So what they do is they imperialize and they go into China and Indochina. All right, and the U.S. is allies to some extent with China and Indochina. So when Japan invades those two places, all right, the United States decides to put sanctions on the Japanese. They don't attack them. Instead, they place an oil embargo against Japan, which hurts Japanese economy because if you think about it, they need oil in order to function. All right, the U.S. is one of their biggest supplier of oil at this time, and an embargo is when the United States denies shipments of oil to Japan. So Japan is now missing a big chunk of its oil supplier. All right. So, what are the casualties? If we look at the casualties of the war, Japan really, I mean, I'm sorry, of the war, of Pearl Harbor, Japan had less than 100 men die. All right. 29 planes were lost and 5 midget submarines were lost. On the other hand, the United States, this was a sneak attack. All right. The United States, they had no clue this was going to happen. They had 2,335 servicemen who were killed. Also, 68 civilians were killed, and 1,178 were wounded. 188 planes were lost, and 18 ships, 8 battleships, 3 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 4 other vessels were lost. So, following this, all right, FDR's response about the attack on Pearl Harbor, which you're actually going to listen to part of it today. It's a very famous speech, and it's one that might be one of the most famous speeches in American history. On December 8th, he addresses everyone in the United States, and he says December 7th, 1941, which was the day Pearl Harbor happened. He says, a date which will live in infamy. The United States was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. As soon as Pearl Harbor happened, you have a rise of nationalism in this country. And, the phrase that they like to say is they awoke the giant or the gentle giant, right? The United States was not even part of this war. And once they were awoken, once they were brought into it, you have a rise in nationalism right away. Many sons enlisted into the military to help fight the war. Overnight, you have enlistment rates that are through the roof. Many daughters enter the workforce to help aid the cause. So once again, moving right into a wartime economy. All right, the men are going off to war. The women are taking their places in the factories. And remember, this is going to be also what brings them out of the Depression. All right, the effect and outcome. On December 8th, 1941, the United States declared war on Japan. All right, 3 days later, Germany declares war on America because Japan and Germany are allies. So this is another one of those alliance systems. Italy then declares war on America. Great Britain declares war on Japan. And here we have America becoming fully entangled in this world war. All right. Check for understanding. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 is an illustration of the 1. Impact a single event can have on public opinion in a time of crisis. 2. Effectiveness of a policy of appeasement in stopping aggression. 3. Success of the pacifist movement in the United States. Or 4. The role of communism as a negative influence in global affairs. We will talk more about this tomorrow, but if you really think about it, should be a very simple answer. So what we're going to do on day one, all right, is we are going to read and annotate the speech by FDR the day after Pearl Harbor. And I want you to keep in mind, do you think FDR's response to the attack on Pearl Harbor was the right one? If you were the president, would you have asked for a declaration of war? And explain. All right, this is going to be a 20-point formative, which I will absolutely collect. 10 points for the annotation and 10 points for the response. On day 2, we will be doing a gallery walk, all right? And your talking points, I want you to keep a few questions in mind. How did the Japanese catch America off guard with their sneak attack of Pearl Harbor? How do you believe these pictures made citizens of the United States feel, and explain? How do you think this changed people's beliefs about the war and the war effort? This, if you guys notice, this is a relatively short lecture, and the reason is we're going to have a lot of conversation on this together in class. I don't want to give you too much information because this is one of, if not the most important event in shaping America's 20th century history, all right? After this event, America is forced into World War II, and because of that, everything changes after World War II. So it's very important that we understand the, why Pearl Harbor was, as important as it was. We will talk much more about this in the next 2 days. Have a good night.